Hi everyone, I am Mr. Aldalli Shanabasappa, Assistant Professor. Welcome you all for the third lecture on electrical heating. So in this third lecture of electrical heating, we will discuss about the indirect resistance heating, and the applications of indirect resistance heating will also be discussed in this session. We also take up the type of materials which are used for the heating and what are the major properties required by the materials. So these are what we are going to discuss in the session. So let's begin with the indirect resistance heating. To understand this, I have one picture here. So name indicates that it is indirect. So indirect in the sense the current which is given is not going to flow through the charge. In a direct, you need to recall the direct resistance heating to understand this. So direct resistance heating means the current used to flow through the charge which is to be heated. So there is a direct flow of current into the charge. Whereas in indirect resistance heating, the current will not be flow through the charge. Instead of that, it is made to flow through some other resistor, and the heat will be transferred to the charge through the resistor, not by having current in the resistor. So because of that, it has been named as indirect resistance heating. I hope it's clear now. Have a look at this circuit here, a furnace. So indirect resistance means, look at the supply. The supply is given to the resistance, and these are the resistive heating element, and this resistive heating element should have very high resistance, because if you have very high resistance, then the I square R, that is the heat conversion, will be very high if resistance is increased. So we will have an element which is having very high resistance, and this is enclosed in the resistance is enclosed in an heating chamber, right? And this heating chamber is surrounded with the charge. So the charge is nothing but that is the metal which is needed to be heated, right? So this charge will be in the form of a powder, or it may be in the form of a small pieces, because if you get it in the form of a powder, then the calorific value will be increased and heat will be uniformly distributed, and also the temperature will also be increased. So now let's see how this is going to work. When we give a current flow here, when the current flows from this direction, it will flow through the resistance available here. So there are resistance here, so it will flow through the resistance, and heat will be developed in this resistive coil. Heat will be developed in this. That heat will be transferred to the charge through different modes of heat transfer we have. It may be through conduction, convection, and radiation. So all three comes into the picture in the indirect resistance heating, because charge is not in contact of resistance, but the heating chamber, so which is surrounded this resistive element, the heating chamber is in contact with the charge. So heating chamber will also absorb the heat out of this resistive coil, and that heat is directly transferred to the charge. So the conduction is possible between the charge and heating chamber, but through the resistance heat can be transferred through the charge by a radiation method, or a radiation and a convection method. So here we will have all three type of modes of heat. So whatever the point I have explained here, that has been noted here. The current is passed through a wire, and it should be very high resistance. That's what I told you, because the heat can be increased, and the I square R loss which is produced here is delivered to the charge through one or more modes of a transfer. If you want to have a conduction, there should be direct contact, and because of there is no contact between the resistance and the charge, through radiation also heat will be transferred. So we get the radiation, convection, and conduction also. Conduction is in between charge and heating chamber. So this is about the indirect resistance heating. Now let's have a look over the applications of this method. So this method is generally used in room heaters, immersion of water heaters, and in various types of ovens, resistance ovens, which are used in the domestical cooking purpose, domestic and commercial cooking purpose. So the method here, room heaters, as I told you, you can take an example of room heater here. In a room heater, in a building, in a while constructing that, in a room, we will have an coil will be placed through the wall, and current is made to flow through the coil. But the surrounding air what we have in the room, that will get heated up because of the current flowing in the resistive coil. That resistive coil will be developing the heat, and that heat will be transferred to the air through the conduction, through the radiation, as well as through convection. So that is an example. Even immersion of water heaters. So we will have a coil which will be immersed in the water, and in that coil will have a resistive element. Current is made to flow through that resistive element, and heat will be absorbed by the chamber, and that chamber will transfer the heat to the water. So these are some of the domestic applications of indirect resistance heating. Now let's have a look over the industry. Means how do we use it in a industry? In industry we use it in a furnace. So for industrial purpose, the heating element is kept in a cylinder surrounded by a jacket which containing the charge. So charge is placed in a jacket, and the cylinder will be there, and that cylinder will be surrounded by that charge, and the cylinder will get heated, and that heat is transferred to the charge. So that will be in the big range. So this is going to give you, so these are some of the points of advantage. This kind of arrangement will give you the uniform heat transfer. So uniformity will be maintained, and also we can have automatic temperature control, which is most important point which is required in the industry. In direct resistance heating, we didn't had this kind of an advantage. So here in indirect we can have the automatic temperature control. The resistance ovens employed in domestic and commercial, as I told you. So let's have in details about the resistance ovens which is used in the domestic purpose or even for the industrial purpose. So when we use it for industrials, it is named as resistance furnaces. So have a look over that. So resistance ovens and furnaces, or in other words it can called as resistance furnaces. So resistance furnaces are classified generally on the concept of operating temperature. So we need to understand at what temperature we are using it as a resistance furnace or a oven. If it is used for a low temperature, then it is considered as a resistance oven. So low temperature in the sense up to 300 degrees Celsius. Then the heating chamber which is used up to 300 degrees Celsius, it is considered as a oven, and there must be some ventilation. Ventilation is also provided. Okay, so the resistance furnaces are classified according to their operating temperature. If it is of a low temperature up to 300 degrees Celsius, then we consider it as a resistance oven, because resistance ovens are used in a commercial and a domestic purpose, where we need to use some cooking items or baking potteries. We use it for baking of potteries or drying of potteries, and also we can use it for drying of some varnish coatings, hardening of the metals, right? Hardening of simple synthetic materials, not metals. It comes in industry, right? So this is the domestic purpose. So these are all required some less temperature, right? So we use a furnace which is having a low temperature, and that is called resistance oven. They are also employed in hardening of steel pieces. Next classification is of medium temperature. The furnaces which operates in between 300 to 1050 degrees Celsius are considered as a medium temperature furnaces, and they are used in annealing of steel and non-ferrous metals, and also melting of non-ferrous metals, and also for enameling of stove wires. So to understand what is this enameling, annealing, I have already explained these concepts in my previous sessions or previous videos. So in description I will provide you the link of those videos. Kindly go through the previous videos to understand annealing, enameling, and some important terminologies. Okay. So here non-ferrous metal is nothing but the non-ferrous metals will have very less quantity of iron, because iron will create some it will reduce the temperature, oxidation of temperature. So I will come to that point later. but you need to understand here non-ferrous metal means the metals which are having very less quantity of iron. See, if you remove that quantity of iron, if you reduce the quantity of iron, the weight of that particular metal is going to be lighter. Okay, that is an advantage, and also it will be a good conducting material. So this is an advantage. So we will also have a option of going for non-ferrous metals. So steel and non-ferrous metals can be annealed using medium temperature. In high temperature means the temperature varies from 1050 degrees Celsius to 1350 degrees Celsius, and it is used for hardening of metals. See, this is, we are just talking about the resistance heating. So in that resistance heating we have low, medium and high temperature, and that high temperature is up to 1350 degree Celsius. So don't conclude that the furnaces are working only on this temperature. You will have different type of furnaces which works on more than this, but we are just talking about the resistance furnaces in which 1350 degree is the higher temperature, right? So now let's have a look over the view of a resistance furnace. So the resistance furnace consisting of it's just like we consider it as for low temperature. This picture is for a resistance furnace at low temperature. It means resistance O1. So in O1 what we do, we will have a door. So this is the door, and we open the door opening, and we have some opening for conducting controlled atmosphere. Automatic opening can also be done here, and we'll see this is surrounding body of that O1 is covered with insulating material, so that whenever we hold it to open or whenever we touch the body, a person should not get a shock. So we will have an insulating material. So completely the outer body of that O1 is covered with insulating material. Inside of that we will have an heating element. So these heating elements can be placed either below here at the bottom layer, or it can be placed at the top, or it can be placed at the side walls. So we can have all this, or else we can have the element in all the walls, means top wall, bottom wall and side wall, or we can have only at the top and bottom wall, right? And we have a element here. We have, this is a non-conducting material, earth, and here we are going to place the element which is to be heated. So if I consider, say, you can consider the example, the material here is a bakery item. A bakery item, I will take a very interesting item, that is samosa, right? Samosa is placed on this earth element, and current is flowing through this conducting element here which we have placed. That current is flowing through only the wire, and it will develop the heat in that wire. That heat will be transferred through the conduction or through the radiation to the samosa, right? So the samosa will get heated up, and after a particular automatic controlling system, we can open, automatically door will be opened and we can take it out. Means current will not flow directly through the samosa. So it's called as an indirect resistance heating. It's an application of it. So this is how the resistance furnace at low temperature will be, right? Now we need to understand that what kind of element is used, material is used for that designing of a coil. Okay, so I told you that we should have an wire which should have very high resistance. So nichrome and graphite are two options we can use. If it is for a higher temperature and medium temperature, then we can go for the graphite, or we have some other alloys of materials. So I have given some example here. Nichrome can be used up to 1000 degrees Celsius, and if it is more, then we can go for graphite. Right, now let's have a in detail idea about the materials, and before that we need to understand what are the properties required by a material, so that we can use it as a heating element. So properties required are important. Based on that we will select the materials. Let's have a look over the properties required by the materials. So here I mentioned it, a material which is used as a heating element must possess the following properties. The very most important property is it should be of high resistance or high resistivity, means resistance per unit area. So if the resistance is if resistivity is very high, then what happens? The quantity of resistance coil what we are using will be reduced. Means if you want to develop the high temperature, and if you are using a high resistivity element, you can use a small size of element so that it can develop high temperature because the resistance is high. So that is an advantage. Length of wire may be sufficient, small length of wire may be sufficient to get the required amount of heat. That will reduce the space of a device also. That is an advantage. So next point will be the melting point. In some cases there will I want, say for example, I want to heat some steel and I want the temperature up to 1000 degrees Celsius, right? So in order to heat that steel, I want to go for an indirect resistance heating, where the wire which you are going to use, in which the current is flowed, should maintain that 1000 degrees Celsius, and it should not get affected, it should not be melted. If that wire is melting at 1000 degrees Celsius, then it cannot produce that heat. So the element which is used as an insulating or heating element, that must possess very high melting point, so that if for example if I want to have 1000 degrees Celsius as a temperature, then the material which I am going to use, that should be able to withstand that more than 1000 degrees Celsius, then only I can go for it as an application. Okay, so the melting point should be high. The low temperature coefficient, yes, it's most important. Almost we can also try to get a zero temperature coefficient. So I'll tell you here what is the temperature coefficient and how it will affect the resistance. Temperature coefficient is nothing but resistance will get affected with the temperature. If temperature varies, resistance will also vary, right? So here definitely we are increasing the temperature, means there is a variation in temperature, so that will also affect the resistance. Means we need to have a material which should not get affected with the change in temperature. That is called resistance of that material should not change, it should be constant. That's why we call it as a low temperature coefficient. If not possible to have a zero temperature, at least you try to have a low temperature coefficient type of a material, so that you can maintain the resistance constant throughout the process. If resistance is constant, then we get the temperature effectively, right? If not, it will affect the current, and if current get affected, it will affect the system. So try to have a material which is having low temperature coefficient. And the fourth option or a point which you need to consider is it should be free from oxidation. It should be free from oxidation is nothing but when temperature goes on increases, it will get chemically reacted with oxygen and it will affect the material. So we need to try to have a element in such a case that it should not get affected, oxidized. It should not be oxidized. Why? By increasing the temperature. So we need to have this in a material, this property in a material. We also have one more point which is to be considered here, that is the mechanical strength. Mechanically it should be strong, or ductility. In other words, in technical point we can say ductility. Ductility should be there. Means the material should be ductile, so that we can mold it to any shape, any other shape we require. We can mold it to circular shape, or we can make it as a strip. So if it is not ductile, then while molding it will be broken. So we should be mechanically, stiffness should be there. So these are 5 important properties which are to be considered while selecting a material for a heating element. I hope this is clear for you. Now let's see, is it possible to get all these properties in one element? Definitely not, because one element or one material cannot possess all these properties in it. It's a general natural concept, right? So that's why what we do, we will have alloys. Alloys in the sense, we will mix 2 or more elements together and get one output. So let's have a look over that kind of materials. So now let's here look into that materials used for heating elements. Here the first thing is, the first material generally we use, very most popular material is nichrome. Okay, and that nichrome is a combination of nickel and chromium. Nickel is of 80% and chromium is of 20%. So the heating element for low temperature we use nichrome. It is used for low temperature. In earlier slides I told you that nichrome can be used up to 1000 degrees Celsius. So that is in between the low range. So for low and medium, right, it is in between the low and medium. So for low and medium temperature we use the nichrome wires, and that nichrome wire is made up of a nickel and a chromium combination. It's called as alloy. Or also we can have another combination here, nickel, chromium and iron. Iron is also included into this. So the percentage is also given. Nickel is of 65, chromium is of 15 and iron is of 20%. So what happens if I include iron? See, if I include the iron, there is one advantage and one disadvantage. I mentioned first the advantage. Here the cost of the product is going to be reduced. That is the first advantage. Because you look into this, the combination, the percentage are different here. Nickel was 65, here it was 80, right? So the cost means the quantity of nickel has reduced, so the cost of it is going to be reduced. But the problem with the adding of iron is it reduces the temperature at which oxidation takes place. Means oxidation start taking place at lower temperature only, right? So that is the drawback. So I'll let me tell you that in the points here. So nickel and chromium alloy, that is nichrome, can be used up to 1150 degrees Celsius without any oxidation effect. But when you go for a nickel, chromium and iron combination of alloy, it is referred up to or recommended up to 950 degrees Celsius only, because when you go beyond this, there is a chance of getting a oxidation. So when you add iron into the nichrome, the temperature will get reduced, operating temperature will get reduced, but cost will be reduced. That's the advantage. So generally we won't use nickel, chromium, iron, we use nickel and chromium, that is nichrome, right? So nichrome alloy have very good resistance to oxidation up to 1150 degrees Celsius, but the time it has sufficient strength. It's also having a good mechanical strength, so that we can mold it into required shape. That is an advantage of nickel. So we have nichrome, as I told you, it is limited. Nickel, chromium, iron is cheapest, but it is limited up to 950 degrees Celsius only, right? So alloys like iron, chromium, cobalt and aluminium can withstand the temperature up to so and so 1350 degrees Celsius. We can add those and we can get it up to 1350 degrees Celsius. These are some examples. Nichrome is one example out of it what we got. Then we have another combination, that is nickel and copper. Nickel and copper. So when we have a copper in combination with the nickel, we name it as a Eureka or a Constantine. Constantine is very famous name. It is named as a trade name, and it is used at low temperatures. The very most important advantage of having this combination is it is going to have a almost zero temperature constant. Means as if there is variation of temperature, resistance will remain always constant. That's why it is called Constantine. Okay, so that is why this is what one property we had in a requirement of properties, right? So we cannot get all those properties in one element. We are mixing 1 or 2, 3 elements, and we are trying to get some more points to be matched here. Okay, so this is one combination, and also it will have that's for zero temperature coefficient. And there is one more combination of iron, chromium and aluminium. This combination is called as an Kanta, that's a trade name. It's going to have very high resistance to oxidation at high temperatures. This is important. So oxidation cannot be done up to high temperatures. So it can be used up to high temperature without any problem of oxidation, but mechanically it is bit weak, because we are using aluminium, which is having a less mechanical strength in this, right? So that is what the problem is. So here and there you will have drawbacks and the advantages, but based on that we need to apply it, right? Based on these points of what I am telling you, advantage and disadvantage, based on these points we will apply it according to the requirement. And resistors which are operating above 1150 degrees Celsius, if you want more than that temperature, then they can be made of silicon carbide, molybdenum, tungsten and graphite. For higher temperature we use these kind of materials. It can be made of silicon carbide, molybdenum, tungsten and graphite. So let's have a look over the operating temperature of those elements. Silicon carbide can be operated up to and about 1500 degrees Celsius. Molybdenum resistors are suitable up to 1650 degrees Celsius. So this metal is very ductile, okay, and it will be enough easily used at the room temperature, and easily we can convert it into different shapes at a room temperature itself. So molybdenum is having some advantage of having a ductility, good ductile material. And also this resistors can, but one problem with the molybdenum is these resistors cannot be used in air. These resistors cannot be operated easily in air, because it will be getting affected with the what we can say vapor, okay, easily reacted with the silicon and carbon and also with the vapor. So molybdenum is not suitable for vacuum furnaces because it get reacted with that. And we have some other resistors which are going to be used at a very high temperatures. Those are tungsten resistors. It can be used up to 2000 degrees Celsius, and the maximum temperature of the tungsten is restricted based on the refractory material. So refractory material is nothing but the refractory material will just try to, means if the heat is coming out of the chamber, this refractory material will kick back that heat into the chamber. So the tungsten can be used for a higher temperature, but its temperature is limited based on the refractory material. Refractory material may not be used for higher temperature, right? So that is the only one limit we have here. So the metal must be heated for drawing into shapes. So we can get any kind of shapes of tungsten, but we should heat it and convert it into a different shapes, right? And one more thing is, there was a problem with molybdenum that it is going to get affected with the vapor, but tungsten is having the better options over there compared to molybdenum. Tungsten can be used with the high temperature, for a high temperature, because it can be used in vacuum furnaces and it is having very low vapor pressure. So that makes it advantageous for high temperature instead of molybdenum, where it can go for tungsten. And one more resistor, that is graphite. Graphite can also be used for a higher temperature up to 3000 degrees Celsius, but it is having one problem. The problem is the resistance, means oxidation is the problem. So above 600 degrees Celsius, when you use graphite above 600 degrees Celsius, then the possibility of getting oxidization is high. So we need to provide a separate protection for that. Above 600 degrees Celsius means we need to provide a separate protection for graphite to avoid from the oxidation. Then we can use it for a high temperature without any problem. So these are some of the important materials, heating elements which are used in the heating. So I hope this is very clear for you, and in next session we'll have a complete important concept, that is the design of heating elements. We look into the design of heating elements. If this session is clear for you, like it, share among your friends, and do subscribe to our channel. Thank you.